Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg. Now, Keith Kellogg is a general. He's a guy who is not a Neanderthal. He's not Matt Gaetz, who's just being put into a position because he has no, like, Matt Gaetz only had a tiny record of a private practice where he was also briefly suspended. But, you know, then he paid his dues and was unsuspended, but he only had private practice. He was not like, he never worked for the federal government on like some court. He was never a judge, just a small private practice. And so him being nominated for Attorney General, especially when he had all of that now proven shenanigans with underage girls and then a bunch of other women that he paid for sex, and then the ecstasy in Congress and a bunch of stuff getting revealed. This guy's serious. He's a serious nominee who knows of the subject that he's speaking of when he's talking about basic military affairs. He might not know everything about Ukrainian history. He might not know all the local Ukrainian affairs, but he at least is not a literal numbskull with no reason to be in any position, period, right? Okay. Now, Keith Kellogg, and I'm saying this because I'm saying that he should know better for what we're about to discuss. Now, Keith Kellogg, representing the Trump administration, goes to Fox News because he has been appointed the special envoy for peace to Ukraine. So this guy is supposed to be the special envoy to bring peace between the Ukrainians and the Russians. And he goes on Fox Business and he's asked about the Ukrainians assassinating a Russian general by the name of Kirillov. Now, Kirillov was the head of Russia's chemical weapons development. Now, he wasn't the one like doing the development, but when it comes to Russia's like chemical weapons usage and radiological department, he was like top general. So when we're talking about these chemical weapons being used in Ukraine, it's basically impossible to imagine that that was going on without his approval. So the Ukrainian soldiers that have been gassed on the front line, I mean, he is somebody you can basically point to as a front runner for most helpful for reintroducing chemical weapons into the 21st century. If that's what he's doing, the Ukrainians have a reason to want to take him out. They go, they put a bomb on the scooter, blow up his car, assassinate him. Now, you could say the methodology of how it was done, using an IED on a scooter, not the safest. I mean, what if there was a civilian walking by and you could talk, maybe have private governmental conversations with the Ukrainians about the most ethical ways to carry out assassinations, to prioritize low civilian casualty numbers, etc. Thankfully, no civilians were killed, just a general in this case. Now, all of those ethical questions aside, I see this man who's representing the Trump administration, putting aside the question of IED usage, putting aside the question of endangering civilians, because I think that, you know, assassinating a high-profile general, you know, who's engaging in these types of weapons usage, I think it should be, like, 100% allowable. The idea that only the rank-and-file soldiers can go die on the front line, but the generals who are, you know, working to equip them and train them, they're not, like, allowed. No, that's... I mean, I know that people talk about war as old men sending young men to die, but you're leaning a little bit deep into that stereotype when you're saying it's only the rank and file that can die in our wars. Protect generals like me. Like, I'm just not going to play into that. But I wanted to listen to this man who's representing, again, the Trump administration, describe why he thinks this might have been unethical.
General Keith Kellogg, and he joins me now. General, is this, the killing of this general, is that a setback for peace talks?
Yeah, Stuart, thanks for having me. I don't think it's really a setback, but I would say this. There are rules of warfare, and there are certain things you just kind of don't do. You know, for example, you don't kill wounded soldiers on the battlefield. You're not supposed to kill non-combatants. When you...
By the way, just briefly, while this is the subject, there's been multiple instances in the last few weeks leading up to Christmas of Russians executing Ukrainian service members after capturing them, either in groups or individual instances. This is an instance where some Russian stormtroopers executed 2 Ukrainian servicemen who were holding nothing other than sapper shovels. But back to this, just wanted to briefly touch on that.
Killing flag officers, general officers, admirals or generals in their hometown, it's kind of like you kind of extended it. And I don't think it's really smart to do it. You know, it's just not kind of the rules of war as you said. Now, if you're a general officer and you're on the battlefield or you're forward, you're a legitimate target. But I kind of looked at that and I said, that's carrying a little bit too far, and you hire a mercenary to do it. Not a good idea at all, in my opinion. But, you know, this is warfare, and, you know, warfare is ugly, Stu, and this is the kind of thing you see in warfare. It's unfortunate, and that's the reason why soldiers never want to go to war, because this is what happens.
Now, look, Keith Kellogg, as an individual, can hold whatever view he wants to about the idea of assassinating a general outside of a pre-designated like battlefield, where you could say this is where it is okay, this is where it's not okay. Now, if he wants to hold that position privately, like, you should be allowed to assassinate generals within 100 miles of the front line, but not within 300 miles, and not when they're home with their families, and not when they're, you know, back home away from the country that's allowed to be bombed. See, Ukraine's a country where the violence can happen, where the killings can happen, where the deaths can happen. Russia's the country that's not allowed to happen. Wherever. That's your private view. He's going to represent the Trump administration. Donald Trump was a man who assassinated Qasem Soleimani in Iraq. The reasons and permissions we were in the Middle East for was to fight the war on terror. We had a mandate given by Congress to say, go fight the terrorists. You have these authorizations for use of military force surrounding the fighting of terrorist organizations. And then we use that authorization to bomb Soleimani. Why? Is he a terrorist? Are we just going to declare them terrorists when they don't, you know, fit into the preordained box we already have? We're just going to... Was that assassination of one of Iran's top generals in a country that, you know, it wasn't a battlefield where we were going and we were fighting and we were dying, and, you know, there's a front line here or there. Was this allowed? Was this okay? Was this fine? So it's okay for Trump to assassinate generals away from the battlefield using shaky, very shaky legal grounding, using an AUMF meant to fight terrorists to go bomb foreign countries' generals. And I'm not saying this to defend Soleimani. I'm just saying that under the logic that this man is using, there is no way that he could defend the previous actions of the President of the United States, the same actions that Donald Trump still stands by. So if this is going to be the serious position of the incoming administration, it's going to be taken unseriously, because it's a complete double standard. Trump cannot go flagrantly breaking international norms and procedures that he then asks other countries to uphold when he's assassinating generals who, you know, have done things against the United States. Certainly Soleimani has, but introducing chemical weapons against American soldiers, like, I mean, that's certainly the Ukrainians have a reason. But that's going to get the finger wag from Keith Kellogg as a representative of the Trump administration. It just feels tone deaf to me. Just feels awfully tone deaf. Man, this pissed me off.